This episode of Chains is sponsored exclusively by Charlie Foxtrot Brewing. Ask for beers from this veteran-owned brewery and tap rooms across Southwest Florida and Western North Carolina. Thank you for supporting our veterans. Chains, Part 17. Written by dhonash. Narrated by Vern Henderson, with Tim Price. Look, battling an entire farm's worth of maniacs on zero food and a massive concussion, while it does have its moments, isn't my idea of a perfect day. Not even close. I was accustomed to starting my day at the Hub, our own world-class diner which the president himself had visited twice during his last term. Aside from making some of the best coffee I'd ever tasted, being at the Hub was like having a finger on the pulse of the town. I could walk in and before even ordering I could find out what kind of day it would be. Some days I'd get stories of a conflict between two people. Other days I'd get handshakes and pats on the back for a job well done. The rare complaint was always the cherry on the sundae. Someone would come up to me, express how much they hated to be rude, and then start in with something like, "You should put up a speed trap at such and such intersection because those maniacs in their souped-up cars come roaring down the street." We would, and a few days later those maniacs would turn out to be their son, daughter-in-law, or father, and they'd sulk back into the diner, avoiding eye contact. I'd usually overlook their shame for a few weeks, and they'd get back to normal. Everything is connected here, and that diner was the heart, faithfully moving people in and out of its chambers and onward to their destiny. I did notice that something was wrong that day, in the same way that someone notices that they've passed out. By the time I understood the variables and symptoms, it was too late. In this case, too late was a simple call about illegal dumping. Too late was me at the Hub sitting across from a woman who had just bought me a latte and clearly owned and wore every mauve item ever, insisting that someone was purposely making her yard stink, and that I needed to do something about it, for the love of God and taxes. After she stared blinkingly at my joke about that duty falling under the jurisdiction of the Department of Smells, I told her I'd look into it and wrote down something that may have been her address while politely choking down some of the foam decadence that she had forced upon me. I could tell other people were waiting their turn for the normal banter. So I thanked her for her concern and told her that she was an asset to the community. A very mauve asset. After I finished some breakfast, I got to the car and got ready to switch over to active duty. It was still dark and a little chilly. The sun was just starting to streak the clouds. I had gotten back on the road when a call came through. It was one of the more friendly dispatchers trying to lighten the morning mood.
Ramsey, what's your 20?
I'm up. At the diner. Just about to go active.
Man, have I got some news. Your real first name is Hercules.
Affirmative, dispatch. That's not news. Keep your day job.
This whole time I've been calling you boring stuff like Corporal Ramsey and Bill, when I could have been calling you Hercules. Also, technically, I'm night shift.
You definitely can't call me that. Be advised this might fall under a breach of safety guidelines. Your personal safety.
Listen, you can't talk to me about safety guidelines when you're literally impervious to harm.
What's the 10 code for shut the hell up? Shut the hell up. Also, that's Achilles, you heel. Hercules wasn't technically impervious, he just had super strength and a fancy jacket.
10-4, Corporal Fancy Jacket. Are you 10-11?
Negative. I am 1017 to your location.
That's negative. I have a civil disturbance at 1633 Gemma's Grove. It's angry farmers, so bring your pitchfork.
That's odd. I had someone come up to me at the diner today with that same address, complaining about a smell or something like that.
There is some extra info about suspected illegal dumping, but right now, it's 2 farmers. I assume with pitchforks. Maybe a torch. It's still dark.
10-4. I'll deal with your smart ass later, I guess.
It was going to be a bit of a drive. While I was geographically close, the mountains made it a 20 to 25 minute trip even with the shortcut up the east side of Cedar Cliff. Most people preferred the newer, smoothly paved highway that went around the long way. But this was the only way up when I learned to drive, and I preferred it, especially during the morning rush. When I got on location, I saw Mrs. Mauve, the very same from the diner, out in the yard giving me a friendly wave. She carefully explained everything she did before as if she was presenting evidence in court. I lasted about 10 minutes before asking her to show me where the problem was. The property was densely wooded and took a steep slope at the northern end toward a creek, which she assured me was theirs by rights, and that she'd be damned before she'd let someone stink it up. She paused briefly and presented the area to me as if to solve the case then and there. I asked her to elaborate, and she impatiently blurted out, "Well, don't you smell it?" I didn't smell anything except cow and field. I wanted to let her settle from her increasing agitation before starting in again, so I told her I would investigate and that I might be a while. I started down the steep incline, which I quickly discovered was mostly mush in the morning dew, which turned my steady descent into a half-slide, half-step. Surprisingly, I kept my footing all the way down to the small creek. It was mostly reddish-brown mud with a few big rocks that surrounded a 2-foot drop. I made a mental note to congratulate them on owning their very own waterfall. That's when I saw them, caught along the branches in the creek. Along the north side of the bank was a tangled ball of dead squirrels mixed up with some old vines and some type of netting. I jumped the creek to check it out. There wasn't a scratch on any of the poor little guys, and the ball was actually a nest. They had been dead for a while, but both the squirrels and the nest were untouched by predators. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught something large moving to my left. My attention was so focused on the squirrels that I didn't see a dead bear cub floating down the creek. It sloshed over the small drop and onto the stone below, sending some fluid from the creature flying in all directions, including onto me. I held still for a moment, trying not to think too deeply about the complications, infections, and diseases that a bear's worth of necrotic fluid may cause if splashed artfully onto the face of a hapless passerby. I was failing that particular battle, and my stomach had started to turn when I heard some yelling in the distance off in the woods. A man came suddenly into view from behind one of the larger trees. My presence startled him, and after a moment said, "Oh, Jesus, I thought you were him." After he calmed down a bit and I assured him that I was in fact me, he related a story about how there had been a fire back here late last night and that, upon investigating it himself, he was nearly overcome by a terrible chemical smell. Also that, this morning, he found a man dumping things in the water further up the creek, and that the man threatened him when he confronted him about it. I asked him a couple more routine questions that basically confirmed that he knew nothing, except that the man was unarmed, but seemed to be in a leg brace. He didn't even know whose land bordered to his in that direction, which meant that the woman in mauve was probably the landowner and that, by rights, meant that her family had settled it. I told him that I'd have a look and move further into the forest. The early fall canopy gave the whole place a reddish tint, which, when combined with my incident with the bear and the fact that there might be an irate man to question or arrest, got my nerves up more than usual. I caught sight of a clearing about 200 feet west and moved in that direction. From the edge of the forest, I could see a few young men standing at the edge of a grove of dead apple trees. They were stacking some large blue barrels onto a makeshift trailer. I could overhear them talking about the incident with the neighbor and that if he came around again, he'd end up hurt. I was just about to approach when I heard someone hustle in my direction from behind me. All I could make out before getting smacked hard on the side of the head was the odd leg brace worn by my attacker and the words, "One of you boys tie him up." I came to on the trailer next to the blue barrels in the process of being tied down. My immediate shoving and kicking was thwarted by extreme fatigue and feeling like my head might explode. As they held me down, they emptied my pockets and took my belt. The next time I came to, I was inside some kind of cell tied to a table. A little work against the ropes got me free, and I went to work on the old lock. It came free with a quick shove, and then I was out. Across from the cell was a hacksaw lying on a small sink, and I grabbed it. Immediately, I heard someone coming down the spiral staircase, so I took off in the opposite direction. It was a dead end. At the end of the corridor was another small cell with a brick floor and wall. I heard them yelling down the corridor and that I was missing, and this sound made me feel faint. I entered the cell and hid the hacksaw underneath one of the large bricks in the dirt. Just before I passed out, I heard one of them say, "Oh, look, the loud boy decided he don't want to leave just yet. Chain him up here, and this time don't mess it up."